Alright, this is a screencast for our last writing assignment. When we revised the course over the summer, we talked about the real world tasks that a lot of college students really struggle with, and this was one that was really prevalent. Writing professional correspondence, writing emails to teachers to notify them of an absence, to ask them for an extension on a deadline or an assignment, and also to make requests and things like that. And so we kind of all came to the conclusion that this is not something that's expressly taught, and so we wanted to include this as a unit in 101, since we're moving away from we're moving more towards the direction of preparing you for life and success after college as well. So I wanted to go over some email etiquette and guidelines for writing professional correspondence. And these are tips that you can take with you into the workforce as well when you are making a job inquiry, when you are via email, when you are writing a letter by email regarding a job, a thank you letter for a job interview, things like that. And so proper email etiquette is really essential in a lot of areas, college and in the workplace. So you should always follow best practices when writing professional emails. Those ensure that you're going to use proper etiquette and increase the odds that you are going to be taken seriously. One thing that you need to remember is that your instructors have multiple classes, and which means that their time is very constrained. In general, we teach multiple classes. I teach online and in person, and in-house at Pleasant Valley High School, and so I don't have a lot of free time. So when I check emails, I want to know right from the get-go what the request is. I want it to be worded properly. I want to make sure that there is no shorthand or text speak or anything like that in it. Those are kind of things that kind of turn me off as far as taking a student seriously. So here's a couple of general rules for writing professional email. Always use your student account, professional account to send correspondence. Your Gmail or whatever you have set up for your Facebook accounts, and they're usually a lot more. You get a little cutesy with your Gmail names and things like that. You're more likely to be taken seriously when you're sending from a professional account, from your student account when you're here in college. Make sure that, and a lot of times, if you're trying to send an email from a unrecognized account, like an unrecognized I know there's other things besides Gmail, that sometimes it throws it into spam. And so it's always best, if you want to ensure that your email gets sent to the right place, that you use your student account when you're writing from JSU, or a professional email account that you can create. You can create free accounts on Gmail for sending correspondence to job prospective employers. Don't use any shorthand. Don't use any slang. No contractions is a general rule. You want to try to maintain that sense of formality. Your instructors are going to appreciate that. And also, it kind of gives off the impression that you are serious and you are professional, and that's always something that you want to do. Make sure that you're using proper spelling and proper grammar. Never use emojis when crafting a professional email. Don't write in all caps, including when you want to emphasize a word, unless you're writing an acronym, a course number, or something else where the use of caps is expected. If your message is longer, break it up into separate paragraphs to make it easier to read. You want to always try to think about that, especially when you are talking about multiple things within the context of the email. The breaking it into shorter paragraphs is always a good thing to do. Avoid language that is overly familiar if you're not close to the recipient. I always tell you when you're writing to use your professional voice, even if you know your audience and you have a relationship with him or her, you want to use as professional a voice as possible, and that includes using formal language. When in doubt, always opt for the more formal approach. That's just usually generally good best practice for writing a professional email anyway. These are going to apply to nearly every situation when you're writing a professional style email. That's to your professor, to job inquiry, thank you later, that kind of thing. Thank you for the interview. And it's best to kind of keep them in mind at all times. Professional emails feel a bit awkward at first, like when you're writing them, in comparison to messages that you may be sending to friends and family. Professional emails can sometimes feel sterile, rigid, mechanical, and even bland, but it's critical for you to understand that professional emails are formal communications and need to be treated as such. So here's some steps to kind of help you when composing a formal email. Step one, use a clear and concise subject line. That's that subject line that's at the top of your email when you're sending, and it literally should be a basic summary of what the email is about. You never want to, I mean, I've gotten multiple emails from students over the years. Sometimes they'll leave the subject line blank, and it's just a crapshoot whether or not you open it, when you open it, what it's going to be. Or they'll try to put the whole entire message, like, I really am not going to be in class on Tuesday. Can I have my assignments? Everything is entered into the subject line, and that's not what it's for. That subject line tells the reader why they should open the email in the first place. Now, I am a huge proponent of that because I screen my emails like I screen my phone calls. If I don't want to open it or answer it or even attempt to read it, I'm just going to skip over it. So that subject line is going to tell me why I should open the email. And if it's of any import, you want to make sure that you include a good subject line there. Sometimes also, if you don't include a subject line, email systems assume the message is spam, and they'll reroute it away from the recipient's inbox, which is how things get lost in the web, the World Wide Web. Additionally, if the subject line is too ambiguous, like too open for interpretation, or too generic, like hey, hi, how are you, it might not get quick attention. And if you've ever gotten a spam email from someone that starts that way, attempting to be ambiguous, you open it because you're curious, and then before you know it, your computer has a virus. That is the kind of thing that people often avoid. So if you want to get attention, use the subject line to summarize the purpose of your email. For example, if you're requesting a recommendation letter from a teacher, recommendation request could be a suitable subject line. When writing an email to a professor, you need to add a few details to your subject line. Most professors teach dozens, if not hundreds, of students a year across several classes, and it isn't reasonable to expect the professor to know who you are or which course you are taking by your name alone. Adding a few extra pieces of information to the subject line and email opening can help. Make sure the subject line contains the class name and the assigned course number first, then the quick summary. So Bio 101 assignment extension request ensures that the professor immediately connects you with that course right from the very beginning. Step 2, you're going to want to use a professional format for your email. Professional emails tend to have the same basic structure. That's going to include a formal greeting, an introductory paragraph that explains why you are writing, any supporting information in additional paragraphs, and a brief summary or reiteration of the main point, and a formal closing. In some cases, a single paragraph is enough. We're busy sometimes, and I would much rather read, especially if it's hey, I'm going to be late today. Hey, I have something that is coming up that I'm going to unavoidably have to miss your class. A short paragraph is enough to convey the point. That tells your professor that you respect their time, that you're not writing them a novel that they have to read through, that just basically is asking for an extension on something because you are having some internet issues. So You don't want to add any unnecessary bulk, and that's like fluff and filler economy. We've talked about all those things in our things that good writers do, the 7 common moves. Essentially, your supporting paragraphs and summary paragraph can be skipped if you suitably convey everything in that introductory paragraph. Step 3, you want to begin with a formal greeting. All emails, professional emails, need to start with a formal greeting. We use dear when we are addressing maybe a classmate or someone of an informal nature, but good morning, good afternoon, good evening conveys a proper tone. It feels a bit warmer than dear. And it also is, it's just very polite. So good evening. Then you should address them by their proper title. If they are a professor that has a PhD, you should always use doctor. Otherwise, professor, Mr., Miss, Mrs. are suitable alternatives. My proper title is Miss Lloyd. I do not have a doctorate, and I'm not a professor. I'm an adjunct instructor. So my proper title for your purposes is Miss Lloyd. So good evening, Miss Lloyd would be the proper way to start your email with me. Even if you have been told to address a person by only their first name, it is always best to use a more formal approach when you're writing a professional email. That way you get in that habit early on. You kind of err on the side of caution by addressing them in a formal tone. Step 4, after the greeting, you're going to craft the body of your email. First, you need to create an introductory paragraph that clarifies why you are writing. This ensures that the recipient understands the purpose of the message immediately and doesn't have to dig through it to find the point of the email. Next, you can add supporting paragraphs if they are required. Each paragraph should focus on a single point and should only be included if it is important to the conversation. Professional emails tend to be concise, so it's not time for rambling or extraneous details. Finally, if the supporting paragraphs were used, you need to summarize the main point in the closing paragraphs. For example, if you made a request such as asking for an extension, a deadline extension, or a recommendation letter, or you're an upcoming absence, you need to reiterate that, and in the closing paragraph to kind of bring out that full circle that we talk about when we're writing essays with an introduction and a conclusion, ensuring that your main purpose is clarified again, just in case it gets lost in translation. Step 5, you want to use an appropriate closing. When you're wrapping up a professional email, you need to use an appropriate closing. When in doubt, thank you is always a great option. It stands as a sign of appreciation, making it particularly ideal if you made a request in the email. However, you can also use best or sincerely in most situations. When it comes to how to sign a professional email, you should not only use the name that you go by, but also your last name. Don't assume that your recipient, especially an instructor, knows you by first name or middle name if you use it instead alone. Even if your email address includes last name, include it in the signature line as well, just for the sake of clarity. Additionally, if you're requiring a follow-up email, like you've asked for a recommendation, I got the hiccups, an extension or other information, make sure that you add contact information after your name, especially if it's time sensitive. If they can't get an email to go through, you could include your cell phone number. You could include an alternate email if you know that, like a job, an alternate email that they can reach you by. It's usually just simply your email address, and you're like, well, Miss Lloyd, they can just reply to my email address. Well, that's true, but it is. But what if they're away from their desk at the time, and their email is not synced or whatever, and they're replying from a different device? Listing a phone number is never a bad idea. Beyond that, you shouldn't have anything else in your signature. Something that I get a lot is when students are writing an email from their phone, at the bottom it includes like sent from my iPhone. You always want to make sure that you delete that off, or any quotes or sayings that you may have written in as they're not always appropriate. So you want to delete those off of a formal email at the end. I'm going to stop this screencast and I will pick back up with part 2, and then we will look at a sample email to kind of get your thought process flowing before you have to write your own.